Welcome back to 10-Minute Prophecy, where we go through the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation in bite-sized chunks. We hope that this journey through Bible prophecy has been enlightening, whether you are new to prophecy or have studied it in the past. As always, if you haven't seen the previous presentations, please watch them as each prophecy builds on the others. As we go through the 7 seals, we hope that it has been evident that the seals are a magnification of the prophetic 7 churches. Now we will continue on with the opening of the seals. Verses 9 to 11 show us the cry of the martyrs. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren, who would be killed as they were, was completed. The events described under the 5th seal include the martyrs crying out for justice and being given white robes. This raises several questions. Does this seal represent a specific time period? If so, when? Where is the altar where these souls are seen? Who are these souls, and what is their condition? What does their cry for vengeance mean? Why are they given white robes? What does it mean for them to rest a little season? And what is the significance of others being killed as they were? These questions can all be answered clearly. The 5th seal covers a period of time. Like the other seals, the 5th seal represents a specific time period. If the earlier seals are correctly understood, this seal begins after the period of papal persecution. It aligns with the Reformation, when efforts to expose and limit the power of the oppressive papal system gained momentum. The altar. The altar here doesn't refer to one in heaven, but rather symbolizes the place of sacrifice where the martyrs were killed. Dr. Adam Clarke explains this vision as showing an altar on earth, representing those who were martyred for their faith in Christianity and their resistance to idolatry and superstition. John's vision reflects earthly events, not heavenly ones. The souls are depicted under the altar, mirroring the way blood from sacrifices would flow beneath it. This imagery emphasizes their ultimate sacrifice and their call for justice in response to the persecution they endured. The souls under the altar. This passage is often cited as evidence for the idea that the dead exist in a conscious, disembodied state. The argument is that John saw souls in such a state, aware of ongoing events as they cried out for vengeance on their persecutors. However, this interpretation is flawed for several reasons. Number 1, the location of the altar. The popular view places these souls in heaven, but the altar of sacrifice where they were slain cannot be in heaven. The only altar mentioned in heaven is the altar of incense, which was never used for sacrifices. It would be inappropriate to describe the souls of martyrs as being beneath the altar of incense. Number 2, contradiction with heavenly bliss. Depicting souls in heaven as confined under an altar conflicts with the concept of heaven as a place of freedom and joy. Furthermore, it is hard to imagine souls in heaven consumed by a desire for vengeance. In such a glorious state, would they not instead celebrate their deliverance and rejoice in their proximity to their Redeemer, where eternal joy is promised? Number 3, inconsistency with popular theology. According to common beliefs, the wicked are already suffering in hell, while the righteous enjoy heaven. If that were true, the persecutors of these martyrs would already be enduring torment. What more vengeance could the martyrs desire? If the persecutors were still alive on earth, the martyrs would surely know that death and judgment awaited them soon enough. This makes their cry for vengeance appear unnecessary or unkind, even in this interpretation. In light of these points, it seems clear that either the popular understanding of what happens when you die is flawed, or the interpretation of this passage needs to be reconsidered, as the two ideas are incompatible. Some argue that these souls must be conscious because they are described as crying out to God. However, This reasoning overlooks the literary device of personification, where inanimate objects or abstract concepts are given human traits like life, action, or intelligence. For example, in Genesis chapter 4, verses 9 to 10, Abel's blood is said to cry out to God from the ground. In Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 11, the stones of a wall are described as crying out and the beams as answering. In James chapter 5, verse 4, the wages withheld from laborers cry out, and their cries reach the ears of the Lord of hosts. Similarly, the souls mentioned in this passage could be described as crying out without implying they are conscious. It is a symbolic expression rather than a literal one. Albert Barnes highlights the inconsistency in the traditional interpretation of this verse with the following clarification. We are not to suppose that this literally occurred, and that John actually saw the souls of the martyrs beneath the altar, for the whole representation is symbolical. Nor are we to suppose that the injured and the wronged in heaven actually pray for vengeance on those who wronged them, or that the redeemed in heaven will continue to pray with reference to things on earth. But it may be fairly inferred from this that there will be as real a remembrance of the wrongs of the persecuted, the injured, and the oppressed, as if such a prayer were offered there, and that the oppressor has as much to dread from the divine vengeance as if those whom he has injured should cry in heaven to the God who hears prayer and who takes vengeance. This interpretation reinforces the idea that the imagery is meant to symbolize justice and divine accountability, not literal events in heaven. Readers are often misled by the common definition of the word soul. Many assume this passage refers to an immaterial, invisible, and immortal essence in humans that is freed at death when the body ceases to function. However, no instance of the word soul in the original Hebrew or Greek supports this interpretation. Instead, the term often means life and is frequently translated as person. It can refer to both the living and the dead, as seen in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, where living soul is used, and in Numbers chapter 19, verse 13, which the Hebrew concordance translates as dead soul. Also to note that when God made man, as it states in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, he formed him from the dust of the earth and breathed the breath of life, then God calls him a living soul. Here we see that God considers a living soul to be both a body and breath of life. Moving on, this passage also mentions that the souls are described as crying out for their blood to be avenged, something an immaterial soul, as commonly understood, wouldn't possess, nor would they care about if in heaven. The term souls here simply refers to the martyrs, the people who had been killed. The phrase souls of them is a way of describing the entire person. John's vision portrays them as having been sacrificed on the altar of papal persecution, lying dead beneath it. They were not alive when John saw them under the fifth seal. In fact, the same group is described later in Revelation chapter 20, verses 4 to 6, where it is stated that they live again for the first time at the resurrection of the righteous. Their cry for vengeance is symbolic, much like Abel's blood crying out to God from the ground in Genesis chapter 4, verse 10, representing their plea for justice. The white robes. The white robes symbolize a partial response to the martyr's plea. How long, O Lord, until you judge and avenge our blood? Why was this needed? These individuals had been buried in disgrace. Their lives were distorted, their reputations ruined, their names slandered, and their motives vilified. Their graves were marked with shame, treated as if they contained the remains of the most contemptible people. At the time, the Church of Rome, which shaped public opinion across much of the world, worked tirelessly to ensure its victims were despised by all. Then came the Reformation. It gradually became clear that the Church itself was the corrupt and guilty party, while those it persecuted were the righteous, the pure, and the steadfast. As the Reformation spread among the more enlightened nations, the Church's reputation crumbled, while the martyr's honor was restored. Eventually, the full extent of the Papal Church's corruption was exposed, leaving it disgraced before the world. Meanwhile, the martyrs were vindicated, recognized not as criminals, but as faithful believers who suffered for the word of God and the testimony they upheld. Their names were redeemed, their virtues celebrated, their courage admired, and their memories cherished. In this way, white robes, symbols of purity, honor, and righteousness, were given to every one of them. The little season. Even after the Reformation had spread widely and gained strong footing, the brutal actions of Romanism didn't completely stop. There were still several horrifying outbreaks of persecution fueled by the hatred of the Roman Church. Countless individuals were punished as heretics and added to the growing ranks of martyrs. The complete vindication of their cause was postponed for a little season. During this period, Rome continued to claim the lives of hundreds of thousands more, further deepening its guilt for the blood of the innocent. Refer to Buck's Theological Dictionary article Persecution. Eventually, however, the spirit of persecution was subdued, the martyr's cause was vindicated, and the little season of the fifth seal came to an end. This concludes our time together. Thank you for joining us. We hope you have enjoyed this nugget of prophecy. Join us next time as we continue on in Revelation chapter 6 with the opening of the sixth seal. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you again soon.